After rising to become Roblox's most popular game, BedWars has suffered one of the worst downfalls imaginable, with the game losing over 90% of its audience. But what happened to such a legendary game? How did such a beloved experience meet such a tragic demise? This is the ultimate downfall of Roblox BedWars. Now, to be able to understand this downfall, we must go back to the very beginning, with a small developer by the name of Snicktrix, owner of one of Roblox's most popular games. Now, Islands was a recreation of Minecraft's Skyblock game mode, and while the game had some success, Snicktrix wanted to create something much bigger. And in May of 2021, he and his team would release something that would change history as we know it today, BedWars, with the oldest version of the game looking like this. Now, the game originated with only one game mode, being squads. However, players absolutely loved the simplicity of the game, and since Roblox was dry, BedWars saw immediate success. Due to this popularity, BedWars promised weekly content changes, and this gained the attention of large content creators such as tanqr and DV Plays, who would permanently switch up their content to BedWars. And due to this success, the game would see many updates like kits such as the Archer, Barbarian, Inferno Shielder, along with so many more. This would also see the release of the Solos game mode, where players would be forced to rely purely on their own abilities. Balloons and Emerald Armor would also be added, along with a 16v16 game mode. Now, this would be around the time when BedWars would begin to do massive weekly changes, having players very excited to see what they would add week by week. However, it was clear that despite this, something huge was coming. And on the 27th of August, BedWars would see the release of Season 1, easily their biggest update yet. Now, Season 1 would introduce the Battle Pass system, seeing the release of Jade, Pyro, Raven, Bounty Hunter, Beekeeper, and Warrior. The game would also see changes like the Locker and missions, allowing for more incentives to grinding out the game. And in the coming months, BedWars would only double down on their update quality, seeing a win streak update, Elder Tree, Tesla coils, dodo birds, but most importantly, lucky blocks, which added more risk/reward to the game. Now, players absolutely loved the Lucky Blocks game mode as it added an element of RNG, breaking the repetitive nature of the simplistic game modes previously seen before, and overall just brought a new sense of enjoyment to the player experience. And these would be what most players would consider to be the best days of BedWars. With YouTubers constantly flocking the scene, this was truly a golden age for BedWars, and little did players know things would go horribly wrong for BedWars. But for now, things were looking great for the game, and it was looking apparent that players were looking for something big to follow up the beloved Season 1, and that of course would be Season 2, which would release in October of 2021. Now, Season 2 was definitely a downgrade to Season 1, however its Halloween theming made it a pretty interesting season. Of course, seeing the release of 4 new kits, being Ares, Jack, Fisherman, and Gompy. The game would also see a brewery adding potions into the game. Along with this, the 16v16 game mode would be expanded to 30 players. And in the coming months, BedWars would continue to see major changes, such as Ranked, adding a new level of competition to the game. Some other things would include purple lucky blocks, a voice chat game mode, Vanessa, duels, along with Sky Wars, all of which happening in just a couple of months. These consistently large and great changes would make players start to love the game, making the wait in between seasons feel fun and unique. And speaking of wait between seasons, in the final month of 2021, BedWars would see the beautiful Season 3. Now, Season 3 would see the addition of enchant, allowing players to gamble to get random damage enchants, with their on release being static, fire, and void. And along with this, we'd also get a battle pass, introducing 6 new kits into the game, seeing Frosty, Yeti, Airy, Santa, Gingerbread Man, and Smoke, allowing this to be one of the most loved seasons yet. And to conclude 2023, BedWars saw the release of the Void Region Bundle, being a Jade-like mobility kit. Now, 2021 was an amazing first year for BedWars, but let's see what 2022 has in store.
So, there is a couple of reasons why I want to quit this game.
I've not been enjoying Roblox or just this game in general,
but I just don't know if it's going to be around for much longer or if I want to keep playing it.
After over 7 months since release, BedWars was beginning to feel repetitive for many players. Now this came from the same repetitive gameplay loop, where players were just burnt out of getting these same updates over and over again, where to many players it felt like the updates that we were getting were simply just new lucky blocks, kits, or items. And even more devastating, pay to win was growing in prevalence, and it felt like players who had played free to play were at a severe disadvantage. And this unfortunately caused the first quarter of 2022 to be one of the darkest times in BedWars history. Now the highlights of this time would be very minimal, seeing a Lunar New Year event with the Uzi kit, which would be the first non-exclusive mobility kit. BedWars would also see clans be added to the game, which allowed players to create public or private clans, allowing for the most skilled players to be able to network efficiently. Now all of these were considered decent updates, but they just simply did not give players enough content to enjoy, as it felt like for every one good update, there were 4 bad ones to follow, and players were tired of the interminable wait for the next season. But finally, in March of 2022, we saw Season 4, which unfortunately was considered by many players to be the worst season so far. Now, the main aspect of Season 4 would be the vending machine, where players could spend emeralds to gamble for random items. Now, these items would include things like the bear claw and carrot cannon. Now, players did not like this season because it didn't feel like enough content to actually justify a whole season. And along with that, the battle pass unfortunately had some of the worst kits seen before, being the Crocowolf, Alchemist, Sheep Herder, and Nyx, with Nyx being considered the worst level 50 battle pass kit yet. Worse yet, weeks after this, Jade and Void Regent would see their biggest nerf yet, completely ruining the kits that so many had loved. And this made it clear that the downfall of BedWars was becoming more and more prevalent. But surprisingly, BedWars' future updates would make a massive comeback for the game, with Metal Detector and Conqueror being new additions to the battle pass, both of which being fun meta kits. The Boba Blaster would also be added as an effective late game item. The massive gun game update would also drop, which would be considered one of the most enjoyable game modes due to its very quick pacing. The Cyber Kit would also be dropped alongside the grappling hook, which many considered to be the best item in the entire game. Now this would lead players to feeling significantly more optimistic about the future of the game, and this optimism would only grow when BedWars would see its biggest update ever, Season 5. And that's because BedWars would see its biggest change yet, the Void, which would be a new mid-game addition allowing players to venture into the deep abyss to be able to face void creatures while obtaining Crystal Shard. This allowed for exclusive weapons to be unlocked, such as of course the Void Sword, and of course the Void Armor. And better yet, the new Battle Pass would step things up completely, seeing Lucia, Dino Tamer Dom, Cobalt, Star Collector, and Zephyr. Now this would be one of the best periods since the release of the game, being considered the pinnacle of BedWars history due to an amazing Battle Pass and overall just amazing content changes that were added. And throughout the coming months, BedWars would continue to see phenomenal changes, such as the Attack Helicopter, Penguin Survival 2.0, the Evelyn Kit Bundle, Snow Cone Machines, and Backpacks. But most notably being BedWars' first ever live event, the Pirate Invasion. Now this would introduce a live pirate invasion for all BedWars players to experience. And this became huge as it allowed BedWars to reach its highest player count ever at over 400,000 concurrent users. And better yet, the update was streamed by people like Creecraft and tanqr, bringing large outside attention towards the game. Now this live event would bring us the TNT Wars game mode, an 8v8 formatted game mode where players work to destroy the other base. Along with this, the game would see the Hannah kit, explosive arrows, and a pirate event shop. Now this made it clear that BedWars was in its best state ever, surpassing even the beta days of the game, with an amazing new battle pass and kits, consistent, unique, and exciting content changes, and of course one of the most active communities on Roblox, this was truly the golden age of BedWars. And truly, it was just the wait for the highly anticipated Season 6. Now, Season 6 would drop in September of 2023, seeing the release of the Relics update, major gameplay changes which players would vote on at the start of each game, some of which including the Dragon, Knight's Code, and the glitched enchant table. This update would also introduce 6 new kits, being the Lanny, Warden, Zera, Wim, and Kalia, with Kalia being considered to be one of the best on-release kits yet. However, despite this, BedWars would begin to see some backlash due to Season 6's failure to meet expectations set by Season 5. However, despite this backlash, most players would consider Season 6 to just be alright. And in the month of October, BedWars would see its biggest seasonal event yet, the release of the Halloween Crypt Trials, which would hold a series of puzzles and challenges players could complete for the Crypt Kit. This once again brought mainstream attention back to BedWars, being the single most loved event in the game's history. The Gloop item would also be added, countering very hated mobility kits. The game would also see the release of Cosmic and Glitched Lucky Blocks, the Juggernaut game mode, and the minigame Mountain game mode, which was a winter version of the Crypt Trials, seeing the free Adetunde kit upon completion. And to conclude 2022, BedWars would see the Sheila kit bundle along with New Year's Lucky Blocks. Now, while 2022 started off poorly, it was clear that BedWars had made a resurgence. Now let's see what 2023 has in store for the game. This is the Titan boss, an optional in-game boss which upon defeat would reward the team who slayed it. Now this of course was the main premise of Season 7, with the Titan boss also coming with mini Diamond Guardians. Season 7 would also add player levels into the game, which allowed a leveling system for characters up to level 20. Now the primary reward would be a free kit called Whisper, with of course the update also seeing the release of Lucky Crate, random RNG loot box rewards. Now, the primary purpose of this leveling system was to divide players based on skill level. The battle pass would also include Drill, Umbra, Flora, and Caitlyn, which were considered to be mostly mediocre kits. This update would also make a very controversial choice to remove balloons from the game, sparking the most backlash BedWars had ever seen. But despite this, the game was holding on to what it had back in 2022, with the year beginning quite nicely. However, in the next few weeks, BedWars would make changes like the 5v5 ranked, Rainbow Lucky Blocks, the Easter egg hunt event, the Lila kit and the Headhunter, and the Pirate chests. Unfortunately, seeing the same mediocre updates presented in 2022, and it was unfortunately just becoming more and more readily apparent that BedWars was losing the charm that 2022 had brought, and Season 8 would need to be something spectacular to bring back the BedWars players had once loved. So in June of 2023, BedWars would release the highly anticipated Season 8, seeing the release of the Forge. Now the Forge allowed players to construct a multitude of different weapons, such as scythes, hammers, and daggers. The global health would also be brought up to 150 as a way to accommodate for the new weaponry. The battle pass would also include 3 of some of the best kits seen before, seeing Fortuna, Ignis, and Electra. Now looking back retrospectively, this update would completely change the main aspect of the game, with many players respecting the risk that the developers took, and with others absolutely despising the unwelcome changes. But despite this, BedWars would continue to push on, implementing a hyper-gen game mode, the Milo kit along with Emerald Shield, and most notably Win Streak 1v1. Now Win Streak 1v1 would easily be BedWars' most anticipated update ever, allowing for players to 1v1 based on their individual skill levels, with higher win streaks equating to harder opponents. And while pay to win did certainly exist in the game mode, it was seen to be a mostly fair experience. Now in the following couple of weeks, BedWars would release another huge update, being the kit contracts. Now what kit contracts basically did was they gave rewards for playing as certain kits. Now Barbarian would be the first kit to have a contract, and over the weeks this would become an update trend where more and more kits would actually get contracts. And in the month of October, BedWars would see a remaster to the Crypt Trials with the Crypt Caverns update, which to many was seen as a fun sequel to the beloved Crypt Trials. Following this would be Halloween Lucky Blocks. Now unfortunately, despite these updates, the game felt to be in a worsening state, where updates were beginning to feel very repetitive, leading to player burnout heavily growing. Pay to win was also growing more and more problematic, and seasons felt to be getting worse and worse. And along with this, the wait for Season 9 felt extremely unending, and it was clear that Season 9 had a massive responsibility. And finally, on the 17th of November 2023, the long-awaited Season 9 would drop. Now the main aspect of Season 9 would be the Monarch, which to many felt like a copy and paste of Season 7. The Era system would also be added to the game, which required Diamond Era upgrades to make bigger purchases, such as things like the crossbow or Telepearl. This to many felt like an anti-fun mechanic, with many of the Era changes being reverted due to their immense backlash. Now while the content wasn't great, the Battle Pass kits were considered somewhat decent, with the kits including Yamini, Cogsworth, Yumeko, Noelle, and Terra. Now overall, this update would fail to meet the expectations of most players, with it not being the worst season so far, but failing to match the glory of Season 5. And during this time, it was made readily apparent that BedWars was losing players, where in the closing half of 2023, BedWars would lose tens of thousands of players. Now 2023 would conclude with a Sigrid bundle, which simply felt like another cash grab to most players. Now 2023 was a turbulent time for BedWars, with the year starting off alright, however closing off in a pretty bad way. So now let's see what 2024 has to offer.
Alright, so you guys have been asking me non-stop to play some Rivals. So here I am in this brand new shooter game.
I'm telling you right now, boys, every single player that plays Roblox BedWars is all playing this game, and it is called Rivals.
Now, many of the same problems from late 2023 would still apply, such as player burnout and repetitive updates. However, there was an even bigger problem that arose, which was the general player burnout for BedWars. Players unfortunately found that BedWars' gameplay loop had quickly become repetitive, and this was causing many players to leave BedWars and search for other games. And unfortunately, there were now other games to play, with PvP games like Blade Ball and Rivals quickly growing on the horizon. This would unfortunately cause both Fulton and Mini Bloxia to permanently leave the game, with the loss of these two YouTubers being absolutely devastating for the game. Worse yet, creators like Rectway, Tapwater, It's Maddie, and many others would also leave for other games. This would lead to BedWars having the lowest player count it had ever seen, ultimately causing the developers to stop putting as much effort into the game, as the returns on their hard work would be less and less after each change. This would be made clear when the biggest updates of the year would be the Heroes Lucky Block and a One in the Chamber game mode, all of which being fine updates, but nothing that would get players excited for the future of the game. It was evidently clear that BedWars needed something huge. And fortunately, that would come with the release of Season 10, which would be a culmination of all of the previous seasons seen before, bringing back relics, map voting, the forge, vending machines, along with other changes seen in the past. This update would also see 5 new Battle Pass kits, with Bexat, Agni, Styx, Nayoka, and Hephaestus, which unfortunately were considered to be some of the worst season kits. And what was made even worse was that all Season 10 kits could be purchased 2 seasons later, removing all exclusivity that the kits would have. Now, one somewhat positive change would be that Ranked would return back to the squads format, and overall, this season would be considered to be bittersweet by many players, where despite the fact that it was low effort, it felt like a pretty good throwback to previous seasons. However, BedWars had a significantly larger problem, and this would be the problem which would ultimately kill the game: Rivals. Now, Rivals would be an Arsenal-like PvP game, which was able to easily match the enjoyment and popularity of BedWars. And while the game was small at first, it quickly overtook BedWars in popularity, causing BedWars' biggest YouTuber to permanently leave the game. Now, this would be the true nail in the coffin to BedWars' future, where BedWars was now averaging half of what it was getting in 2023, struggling to even reach over 30,000 players. And it truly felt like the future of the game was hopeless, and unlike previous years, BedWars would not make a resurgence, with what was supposed to be the biggest update of the year being Season 11, being arguably the worst season so far. Now, the main change with Season 11 would be the Bedcoins edition, which would allow players to purchase kits with in-game currency. However, the problematic part of this update would come with the Battle Pass, which for the first time would not see a single kit, with the release of 3 new kits, with all of them being purchasable right from the get-go. This in turn made the Battle Pass entirely worthless, and the breaking of the conventional standards set before was a risk that did not pay off, as now players had basically no reason to play the new season, as simply put, there was nothing to grind for in the game, and this season unfortunately failed to bring back the BedWars that players had longed for. Now, for the latter half of 2023, BedWars would see a few minor changes, being tournaments, and an OG BedWars rework, which removed most of the old season changes that had accumulated over the years. And this would be the time when BedWars would reach its lowest player count ever, with it on average seeing less than 20,000 active users, versus the 80 to 200,000 it would get in previous years. And to close off 2024, BedWars would see Season 12, which brought the Void Invasion into BedWars, which would be a remaster of what Season 5 did. Along with this, BedWars would bring armor enchants into the game. And of course, the season would also drop with 3 kits, being non-exclusive to the Battle Pass. And as a final update, BedWars would see the return of the 2022 minigame Mountain, which was simply just a lazy re-release. Now let's move on to the final year of BedWars.
I'm sorry to say this, but this is gonna be the last Roblox BedWars video I post on this channel.
So the past few weeks, days, you guys might recognize why I wasn't uploading videos. Well, it's because I've been grinding on a different game, okay?
Looking at BedWars today, things have never felt more hopeless, with the game being in the worst state it has ever been. Now, the state of this game has come from issues previously mentioned, where at this current moment, BedWars is at its lowest player count ever, with all big YouTubers permanently switching their content over to different games, along with many of BedWars' most dedicated players permanently leaving the game. It feels like the true lack of attention that is coming towards BedWars is causing a new game to come on the horizon. A new game by easy.gg, which would completely replace BedWars, similarly as it did to Islands. So while this game still has some active audience, BedWars is destined to completely die off. And after almost 4 years, maybe that's alright. Thank you for watching.